At the end of 2025, it looked like Paul Pogba's nightmare was finally over. He was standing on stage at the Globe Soccer Awards in Dubai, accepting the Best Comeback Award. Yet a year later, he was without a team. Again, Monaco ended his contract just 1 year after signing him. This was one of the most talented midfielders of his generation, and now he couldn't even get on the pitch. From winning 4 Scudettos, scoring in a World Cup final, being the most expensive footballer in the world, to a guy that people thought retired. What the hell happened to Paul Pogba? In 2009, Manchester United signed Pogba from Le Havre as a teenager. He was bigger and stronger than basically everybody his age, but somehow had the technique of a player half his size. He could dribble, shoot, play these ridiculous passes, and physically bully other kids. Alongside guys like Ravel Morrison and Jesse Lingard, Pogba helped United win the FA Youth Cup in 2011. The talent was obvious, but the problem was Pogba also knew how good he was. Sir Alex Ferguson wanted to be patient with him. Pogba wanted to play immediately. Then came the game against Blackburn in December of 2011. United's midfield was falling apart. Paul Scholes had retired, Darren Fletcher was unavailable. They were running out of actual midfielders. So Pogba sitting there thinking, surely this is finally my chance. Then Sir Alex looks at his squad and decides he'd rather play right back Raphael and winger Park Ji-sung in midfield. Pogba sat on the bench for the entire game and United lost 3-2. He later said that was the moment he basically knew he needed to leave. And this is where Mino Raiola comes into the story. Raiola believed Pogba was ready for senior football and started working on a move to Juventus, where Antonio Conte was willing to actually give him an opportunity. United weren't happy, Sir Alex especially wasn't happy, but Pogba made his decision. In 2012, one of Manchester United's most talented academy players walked away for basically nothing, and somehow 4 years later, United would spend a world record fee to get him back. Leaving United for Juventus ended up being the best decision Pogba ever made. They put him in a stacked midfield. You had Andrea Pirlo, who sat deep and controlled the game. You had Arturo Vidal, who ran around trying to murder everyone and win the ball back. Then you had Claudio Marchisio, who could do a little bit of everything. And then you had Pogba. Juventus normally played him on the left side of the midfield diamond. And this is important because Pogba wasn't being asked to do everything. He didn't have to be Pirlo and control the entire game. He didn't have to be Vidal and chase people around for 90 minutes. He had freedom. He could drift towards the left wing, carry the ball forward, take players on, make late runs into the box, and try those ridiculous passes that only Pogba would even think about attempting. And obviously, he could shoot.
Steiner allowed to just hit at that ball without a challenge, and then the driven shot! What a goal! Paul Pogba breaks the deadlock.
This was the version of Pogba everyone fell in love with. A 6'3" midfielder moving like a winger. Over those 4 years, Pogba went from some talented kid United didn't trust to one of the best midfielders in football. He won 4 Serie A titles, 2 Coppa Italias, won the Golden Boy Award in 2013, helped Juventus reach the Champions League final in 2015, and made the FIFA Pro World 11. By 2016, he was one of the biggest stars in football. And Manchester United decided they needed him back. But this time, it was going to cost them. 4 years after letting Pogba leave for nothing, United paid Juventus a world record £89 million to bring him back. They launched the whole Pogba campaign, got Stormzy involved, and presented Pogba like the superstar who was gonna bring Manchester United back to the top. The expectations were ridiculous, but the first season was actually pretty successful. Pogba played 51 games, United won the League Cup, and then won the Europa League, with Pogba scoring in the final against Ajax. But the best version of Pogba wouldn't actually come at Manchester United, it came with France. At the 2018 World Cup, Didier Deschamps recreated the perfect environment Pogba had at Juventus. Next to him was N'Golo Kante, which was a cheat code if you're Pogba, because Kante was running around doing the defensive work of about 3 different human beings. That gave Pogba more freedom to do what he was actually incredible at. Drop deep, get on the ball, break lines with his passing, carry the ball forward, and occasionally try some ridiculous things, because even if he messed up, Kante would probably clean it up anyways. But the biggest thing people saw at the World Cup was Pogba's leadership. For years, people had questioned his personality. This guy's too focused on haircuts, too much social media, he's not serious enough.
Big competitions, won big trophies, and I don't think he leads by example.
Watch the footage from inside France's dressing room, and Pogba was running the place. Before the World Cup final against Croatia, he was the guy standing in front of everyone telling them they're 90 minutes away from making history. Then he went onto the pitch and backed it up. France were leading 2-1 when Pogba launched this ridiculous pass forward to Mbappe. Instead of standing there and orgasming over his own pass, he runs the entire length of the pitch, gets the ball back on the edge of the box, and scores. France won the game 4-2, and Paul Pogba had scored in a World Cup final. final. At 25 years old, he had won Serie A titles, reached the Champions League final, became the most expensive footballer in history at the time, and now he was a World Cup champion. This should have been the beginning of Pogba's prime. Instead, it was the highest point his career would ever reach. The biggest problem with Pogba at Manchester United was that United paid £89 million for the Juventus version of Pogba and then never recreated the system that made that version of Pogba so good. At Juve, he had Pirlo controlling games, Vidal doing the dirty work, Marquisio covering space. With France, he had Conte running around like he just snorted caffeine. At United, the poor guy had Scott McTominay and Fred. United spent a world record fee on Pogba and then constantly asked him to do things that weren't his biggest strengths. Instead of playing on the left of a midfield three with freedom, Pogba would constantly end up playing deep in a 4-2-3-1. Now suddenly, the guy who loved taking risks was receiving the ball directly in front of his own defense. Now Pogba had this habit where he'd receive the ball, use his massive body to protect it, and hold on to it for slightly too long because he knew he was stronger than almost everyone trying to take it away from him. When it worked, it looked beautiful. He'd spin someone and suddenly United were on the attack. But when it didn't work, he'd lose the ball 25 yards from his own goal and everyone would start screaming at him. Then defensively, he was never incredible. He wasn't constantly tracking runners, his positioning was questionable, so United had this incredible midfielder who could do anything with a football, but nobody could agree where he should actually play. Play him deep and you're wasting his attacking ability while exposing his defensive weaknesses. Play him higher and suddenly people started asking who's going to control the midfield for United. Put him on the left and your £89 million central midfielder is playing on the wing. United bought a Ferrari and spent 6 years arguing about which parking spot to put him in. And then Jose Mourinho made everything about 50 times worse. On paper, these two were eventually always going to clash. Mourinho wanted discipline, Pogba wanted freedom. Mourinho wanted players following his instructions exactly. Pogba was the type of player who might see a 60-yard outside of the foot pass and think, why not? Now, at first, they made it work. United won trophies in their first season together. But by the 2017-2018 season, the relationship started falling apart. Mourinho became increasingly frustrated with Pogba defensively and started taking him off in games. Then he started benching him. At one point, Scott McTominay was being picked ahead of the most expensive midfielder in football. Then Pogba goes to Russia, wins the World Cup, comes back to Manchester, and somehow things got even worse. Mourinho eventually stripped him of the vice captaincy. Then cameras caught that incredibly awkward training ground confrontation where Mourinho and Pogba are standing there looking at each other like a divorced couple forced to attend their kid's graduation together.
This is the viral footage, isn't it, of when Pogba comes out, Mourinho ignores him, and obviously, clearly.
By December of 2018, the relationship was completely done. After United drew 2-2 against Southampton, Pogba had a terrible game, and Mourinho reportedly went after him in the dressing room. He accused Pogba of not respecting his teammates and said that he was like a virus spreading through the dressing room. Pogba reportedly fired back and blamed Mourinho's football. The manager and the club's biggest superstar couldn't stand each other. Then 2 weeks later, United played Liverpool, Pogba spent the entire game on the bench, United lost 3-1, and Mourinho was sacked. Now when Ole came in, Pogba actually started playing better, but by then the damage had already been done, because now every bad Pogba performance had become a debate about his attitude. They said he had more haircut changes than goal contributions. His social media presence was criticized. His agent was questioned. People wondered whether he actually cared about United, whether he was a leader, whether he was the one that had gotten Mourinho fired. Pogba had become a weekly soap opera. A massive part of that weekly soap opera was Mino Raiola. Pogba's agent could seemingly never go more than a few months without talking about his future. Real Madrid, Juventus, Barcelona. Every time things started calming down at United, Raiola would appear somewhere and throw another grenade into the situation. The worst example came in December of 2020. United were about to play RB Leipzig in a massive Champions League game. They needed a result to qualify for the knockout stages. And literally the day before the game, Raiola gives an interview saying Pogba's time at Manchester United was basically over. He said Pogba was unhappy, couldn't express himself, and needed a change of air. United then went out the next day, lost 3-2, and got knocked out of the Champions League. Now obviously, Raiola didn't make Manchester United forget how to defend, but dropping that interview right before one of the biggest games of their season was seen as ridiculous. And by this point, fans were exhausted. Now Pogba ended up leaving United for free in 2022 and released an entire documentary about his life. One of the clips showed him discussing United's contract offer with Raiola. United had reportedly offered him more than £300,000 a week. Pogba's response was to say nothing. Manchester United fans had spent 6 years watching the club struggle while their £89 million superstar was constantly linked with leaving. Then they watched him call a contract worth more than £300,000 a week nothing. So by the time Pogba left United for free, a lot of fans were just happy the whole circus was finally over. But while everyone was arguing about football, money, and haircuts, stats, something much darker was happening in Pogba's actual life. In March of 2022, Pogba went to visit his family near Paris, and he was reportedly taken into an apartment by childhood friends where two masked men carrying assault rifles were waiting for him. They demanded 13 million euros. According to Pogba, these were people he'd known for years, claiming they deserved money for supposedly protecting him throughout his career. And somehow it gets even worse, because Pogba's own brother, Matthias, became involved in the entire situation. A few months later, Matthias started releasing bizarre videos online promising massive truths about Paul Pogba. One of the claims was that Pogba had supposedly hired a witch doctor to put a curse on Kylian Mbappe, as if the dictator would allow that. Pogba naturally denied this. So while he was already dealing with injuries, dealing with criticism from United fans, and his football career falling apart, he was also dealing with an alleged extortion plot involving his childhood friends and his own brother. It's very easy for us to sit here and talk about how much money a footballer earns and assume everything else in their life must be perfect. But Pogba later spoke out about how badly everything affected him mentally. He said there were periods where he was depressed and basically didn't want to do anything. Football wasn't even enjoyable anymore. And by 2022, Pogba desperately needed a fresh start. So he went back to the place where everything had once been perfect. The old lady, Juventus. Going back to Juventus was supposed to save Pogba's career. Instead, he barely got to play football. The warning signs had already been there at United. During his final few years in England, Pogba was constantly dealing with ankle, hamstring, and thigh injuries. Then almost immediately after returning to Juventus, he tore the meniscus in his knee during preseason. Pogba had the World Cup coming up, so instead of immediately having surgery, he initially tried a conservative treatment because he desperately wanted to make it to Qatar. It backfired. The knee didn't heal properly, he eventually needed surgery anyway, and missed the World Cup. After winning it and scoring in the final 4 years earlier, Pogba couldn't even be there to defend it. And his first season back at Juventus was basically a write-off. He played just 108 minutes in Serie A, and Juventus were essentially paying him to sit in the medical room. Then when he finally started getting healthy again, everything somehow got even worse. In August of 2023, Pogba was selected for a routine drug test after Juventus played Udinese. He tested positive for DHEA, a banned substance that can increase testosterone. And in February of 2024, he was handed a 4-year doping ban. At 30 years old, 4 years would have basically ended his career right there. Pogba appealed to CAS, which is the Court of Arbitration for Sports, and argued that he'd unknowingly taken the banned substance through a supplement. Eventually, the suspension was reduced from 4 years to 18 months. But Juventus had already had enough. They terminated his contract in November of 2024. Now, Monaco at this time decided to give him an opportunity, but even there, his body wouldn't cooperate, which is what makes Paul Pogba's career so frustrating, because this wasn't some massively overhyped player who was never actually that good. He's not Garnacho. We saw how good he was. We watched him score ridiculous goals. We watched him score in a World Cup final. At 25 years old, Pogba looked like he had everything, but almost everything that could go wrong eventually did. Yes, Pogba definitely made mistakes along the way, but I think calling his career a failure is way too simple. This guy still won a World Cup, 4 Serie A titles, and trophies in England and Europe. Most footballers would kill for that career. The tragedy is that Paul Pogba was talented enough for us to expect so much more. That's why he'll always be one of football's biggest what ifs. Not because we never got to see how good Paul Pogba could be, because for a few years we did. We just didn't get to see it for nearly long enough. If you enjoyed this video, I'm sure you will love this one too. Check it out right here.